Chapter 9. No problem reversing the tale, Feeney said as he shoveled in what passed for breakfast at the eatery at Cop Central. I see him cue in on me. He's looking around for you, but there's plenty of bodies. So I get on the frigging plane. Feeney washed down irradiated eggs with black bean coffee without a wince. He gets on, too, but he sits up in first class. When we get off, he's waiting. And that's when he knows you're not there. He jabbed at Eve with his fork. He was pissed, makes a quick call. So I get behind him, trail him to the Regent Hotel. They don't like to tell you anything at the Regent. Flash your badge and they get all offended. And you explained, tactfully, about civic duty. Right. Feeney pushed his empty plate into the recycler slot, crushed his empty cup with his hand, and sent it to follow. He made a couple of calls, so one to East Washington, one to Virginia. Then he makes a localate to the chief. Shit. Yeah. Chief Simpson's pushing buttons for the blast, no question. Makes you wonder what buttons. Before Eve could comment, her communicator beeped. She pulled it out and answered the call from her commander. Dallas, be in testing. 20 minutes. Sir, I'm meeting a snitch on the Colby matter at 0900. Reschedule. His voice was flat. 20 minutes. Slowly, Dallas replaced her communicator. I guess we know one of the buttons. Seems like DeBlas is taking a personal interest in you. Feeney studied her face. There wasn't a cop on the force who didn't despise testing. You're going to handle it, okay? Yeah, sure. This is going to tie me up most of the day. Feeney, do me a favor, do a run on the banks in Manhattan. I need to know if Sharon DeBlas kept a safe deposit box. If you don't find anything there, spread out to the other boroughs. You got it. The testing section was riddled with long corridors, some glassed, some done in pale green walls that were supposed to be calming. Doctors and technicians wore white, the color of innocence and, of course, power. When she entered the first set of reinforced glass doors, the computer politely ordered her to surrender her weapon. Eve took it out of her holster, set it on the tray, and watched it slide away. It made her feel naked even before she was directed into testing room 1C and told to strip. She laid her clothes on the bench provided and tried not to think about the techs watching her on their monitors or the machines with the nastily silent glide and their impersonal blinking lights. The physical exam was easy. All she had to do was stand on the cinder mark in the tube-like room and watch the lights blip and flash as her internal organs and bones were checked for flaws. Then she was permitted to don a blue jumpsuit and sit while a machine angled over to examine her eyes and ears. Another, sneaking out from one of the wall slots, did a standard reflex test. For the personal touch, a technician entered to take a blood sample. Please exit door marked testing 2C. Phase 1 is complete, Dallas. Lieutenant Eve. In the adjoining room, Eve was instructed to lie on a padded table for the brain scan. Wouldn't want any cops out there with a brain tumor urging them to blast civilians, she thought wearily. Eve watched the text through the glass wall as the helmet was lowered onto her head. Then the games began. The bench adjusted to a sitting position and she was treated to virtual reality. The VR put her in a vehicle during a high-speed chase. Sounds exploded in her ears, the scream of sirens, the shouts of conflicting orders from the communicator on the dash. She could see that it was a standard police unit, fully charged. The control of the vehicle was hers, and she had to swerve and maneuver to avoid flattening a variety of pedestrians the VR hurled in her path. In one part of her brain she was aware her vitals were being monitored, blood pressure, pulse, even the amount of sweat that crawled on her skin, the saliva that pooled and dried in her mouth. It was hot. Almost unbearably hot. She narrowly missed a food transport that lumbered into her path. She recognized her location. The old ports on the east side. She could smell them: water, bad fish, and mold sweat. Transients wearing their uniform of blue coveralls were looking for a handout or a day's labor. She flew by a group of them jostling for position in front of a placement center. Subject armed. Rifle torch. Hand explosive. Wanted for robbery homicide. Great. Eve thought as she careened after him. Fucking great. She punched the accelerator, whipped the wheel, and kissed off the fender of the target vehicle in a shower of sparks. A spurt of flame whooshed by her ear as he fired at her. The proprietor of a portside roach coach dived for cover, along with several of his customers. Rice noodles flew along with curses. She rammed the target again, ordering her back up to maneuver into a pincer position. This time her quarry's vehicle shuddered, dipped. As he fought for control, she used hers to batter his to a stop. She shouted the standard identification and warning as she bolted from the vehicle. He came out blasting, and she brought him down. The shock from her weapon jolted his nervous system. She watched him jitter, wet himself, then collapse. She'd hardly taken a breath to readjust when the bastard text tossed her into a new scene. The screams, the little girl's screams, the raging roar of the man who was her father. They had reconstructed it almost too perfectly, using her own report, visuals of the site, and the mirror of her memory they'd lifted in the scan. Eve didn't bother to curse them, but held back her hate, her grief, and sent herself racing up the stairs and back into her nightmare. No more screams from the little girl. She beat on the door, calling out her name and rank, warning the man on the other side of the door, trying to calm him. "Cunts. You're all cunts. Come on in, cunt bitch. I'll kill you." The door folded like cardboard under her ramming shoulder. She went in, weapon drawn. She was just like her mother and just like her fucking mother. Thought they'd get away from me. Thought they could. I fixed it. I fixed them. I'm going to fix you, cunt cop. The little girl was staring at her with big, dead eyes. Doll's eyes. Her tiny, helpless body mutilated, blood spreading like a pool, and dripping from the knife. She told him to freeze. "You son of a bitch. Drop the weapon, drop the fucking knife." But he kept coming. Stunned him. But he kept coming. The room smelled of blood, of urine, of burned food. The lights were too bright, unshaded and blinding so that everything stood out in jarring relief. A doll with a missing arm on the ripped sofa, a crooked window shield that let in a hard red glow from the neon across the street, the overturned table of cheap molded plastic, the cracked screen of a broken link, the little girl with dead eyes, the spreading pool of blood, and the sharp, sticky gleam of the blade. "I'm going to ram this right up your cunt, just like I did to her." Stunned again, his eyes were wild, jagged on homemade Zeus, that wonderful chemical that made gods out of men, with all the power and insanity that went with delusions of immortality. The knife, with the scarlet-drenched blade hacked down, whistled, and she dropped him. The jolt zipped through his nervous system. His brain died first, so that his body convulsed and shuddered as his eyes turned to glass. Strapping down on the knee to scream, she kicked the knife away from his still twitching hand and looked at the child. The big doll's eyes stared at her, and told Hira Agena that she'd been too late. Forcing her body to relax, she let nothing into her mind but her report. The VR section was complete. Her vitals were checked again before she was taken to the final testing phase. The one-on-one with the psychiatrist. Eve didn't have anything against Dr. Myra. The woman was dedicated to her calling. In private practice, she could have earned triple the salary she pulled in under the police and security department. She had a quiet voice with the faintest hint of upper-class New England. Her pale blue eyes were kinda and sharp. At 60, she was comfortable with middle age, but far from matronly. Her hair was a warm honey brown and scooped up in the back in a neat yet complicated twist. She wore a tidy, rose-toned suit with a sedate gold circle on the lapel. No, Eve had nothing against her personally. She just hated shrinks. "Lieutenant Dallas." Myra rose from a soft blue scoop chair when Eve entered. There was no desk, no computer in sight. One of the tricks, Eve knew, to make the subjects relax and forget they were under intense observation. "Doctor." Eve sat in the chair Myra indicated. "I was just about to have some tea. You'll join me?" "Sure." Myra moved gracefully to the server, ordered 2 teas, then brought the cups to the sitting area. "It's unfortunate that your testing was postponed, Lieutenant." With a smile, she sat, sipped. "The process is more conclusive and certainly more beneficial when run within 24 hours of an incident. It couldn't be helped. So I'm told. Your preliminary results are satisfactory." "Fine." "You still refuse auto-hypnosis?" "It's optional." Hating the defensive sound of her voice. "Yes, it is." Myra crossed her legs. "You've been through a difficult experience, Lieutenant. There are signs of physical and emotional fatigue. I'm on another case, a demanding one. It's taking a lot of my time." "Yes, I have that information." "Are you taking the standard sleep inducers?" Eve tested the tea. It was, as she'd suspected, floral in scent and flavor. "Number." "We've been through that before." "Night pills are optional, and I opt number." "Because they limit your control." Eve met her eyes. "That's right. I don't like being put to sleep, And I don't like being here. I don't like brain rape. You consider testing a kind of rape? There wasn't a cop with a brain who didn't. It's not a choice, is it? Myra kept her sigh to herself. The termination of a subject, no matter the circumstances, is a traumatic experience for a police officer. If the trauma affects the emotions, the reactions, the attitude, the officer's performance will suffer. If the use of full force was caused by a physical defect, that defect must be located and repaired. I know the company line, doctor. I'm cooperating fully. But I don't have to like it. No, you don't. Myra neatly balanced the cup on her knee. Lieutenant, this is your second termination. Though that is not an unusual amount for an officer with your length of duty, there are many who never need to make that decision. I'd like to know how you feel about the choice you made, and the results. I wish I'd been quicker, Eve thought. I wish that child was playing with her toys right now instead of being cremated. As my only choice was to let him carve me into pieces, or stop him, I feel just fine about the decision. My warning was issued and ignored. Stunning was ineffective. The evidence that he would, indeed, kill was lying on the floor between us in a puddle of blood. Therefore, I have no problem with the results. You were disturbed by the death of the child? I believe anyone would be disturbed by the death of a child. Certainly that kind of vicious murder of the defenseless. And do you see the parallel between the child and yourself? Myra asked quietly. She could see Eve draw in and close off. Lieutenant, we both know I'm fully aware of your background. You were abused, physically, sexually, and emotionally. You were abandoned when you were 8. That has nothing to do with it. I think it may have a great deal to do with your mental and emotional state, Myra interrupted. For 2 years between the ages of 8 and 10, you lived in a communal home while your parents were searched for. You have no memory of the first 8 years of your life, your name, your circumstances, your birthplace. However mild they were, Myra's eyes were sharp and searching. You were given the name Eve Dallas and eventually placed in foster care. You had no control over any of this. You were a battered child, dependent on the system, which in many ways failed you. It took every ounce of will for Eve to keep her eyes and her voice level. As I, part of the system, failed to protect the child. You want to know how I feel about that, Dr. Myra? Wretched. Sick. Sorry. I feel that I did everything I could do. I went through your VR and did it again, because there was no changing it. If I could have saved the child, I would have saved her. If I could have arrested the subject, I would have. But these matters were not in your control. Sneaky bitch, Eve thought. It was in my control to terminate. After employing all standard options, I exercised my control. You've reviewed the report. It was a clean, justifiable termination. Myra said nothing for a moment. Her skills, she knew, had never been able to more than scrape at Eve's outer wall of defense. Very well, Lieutenant. You are cleared to resume duty without restriction. Myra held up a hand before Eve could rise. Off the record. Is anything? Myra only smiled. It's true that very often the mind protects itself. Yours refuses to acknowledge the first 8 years of your life. But those years are a part of you. I can get them back for you when you're ready. And Eve, she added in that quiet voice, I can help you deal with them. I've made myself what I am, and I can live with it. Maybe I don't want to risk living with the rest. She got up and walked to the door. When she turned back, Myra was sitting just as she had been, legs crossed, one hand holding the pretty little cup. The scent of brewed flowers lingered in the air. Not a hypothetical case, Eve began and waited for Myra's. A woman, with considerable social and financial advantages, chooses to become a whore. At Myra's lifted brow, Eve swore impatiently. We don't have to pretty up the terminology here, Doctor. She chose to make her living from sex, flaunted it in front of her well-positioned family, including her arch-conservative grandfather. Why? It's difficult to come up with one specific motive from such general and sketchy information. The most obvious would be the subject could find her self-worth only in sexual skill. She either enjoyed or detested the act. Intrigued, Eve stepped away from the door. If she detested it, why would she become a pro? To punish herself? Certainly. And those close to her. To punish, Eve mused. The diary. Blackmail. A man kills, she continued, viciously, brutally. The killing is tied to sex, and is executed in a unique and distinctive fashion. He records it, has bypassed a sophisticated security system. A recording of the murder is delivered to the investigating officer. A message is left at the scene, a boastful message. "What is he? You don't give me much," Myra complained, but Eve could see her attention was caught. "Inventive," she began, "a planner, and a voyeur. Confident, perhaps smug. You said distinctive, so he wishes to leave his mark, and he wants to show off his skill, his brain. Using your observation and deductive talents, Lieutenant, did he enjoy the act of murder?" "Yes. I think he reveled in it." Myra nodded. "Then he will certainly enjoy it again. He already has. 2 murders, barely a week apart. He won't wait long before the next, will he?" "It's doubtful." Myra sipped her tea as if they were discussing the latest spring fashions. "Are the 2 murders connected in any way other than the perpetrator and the method?" "Sex," Eve said shortly. "Ah." Myra tilted her head. "With all our technology, with the amazing advances that have been made in genetics, we are still unable to control human virtues and flaws. Perhaps we are too human to permit the tempering. Passions are necessary to the human spirit. We learned that early this century when genetic engineering nearly slipped out of control. It's unfortunate that some passions twist sex and violence. For some it's still a natural marriage." She stood then to take the cups and place them beside the server. "I'd be interested in knowing more about this man, Lieutenant. If and when you decide you want a profile, I hope you'll come to me." "It's code 5. Myra glanced back. "I see. If we don't tie this up before he hits again, I may be able to swing it." "I'll make myself available." "Thanks, Eve." Even strong, self-made women have weak spots. Don't be afraid of them. Eve held Myra's gaze for another moment. "I've got work to do." Testing left her shaky. Eve compensated by being surly and antagonistic with her snitch and nearly losing a lead on a case involving bootlegged chemicals. Her mood was far from cheerful when she checked back into Cop Central. There was no message from Feeney. Others in her department knew just where she'd spent the day and did their best to stay out of her way. As a result, she worked in solitude and annoyance for an hour. Her last effort was to put through a call to Rourke. She was neither surprised nor particularly disappointed when he wasn't available. She left a message on his email requesting an appointment, then logged out for the day. She intended to drown her mood in cheap liquor and mediocre music at Mavis's latest gig at the Blue Squirrel. It was a joint, which put it one slippery step up from a dive. The light was dim, the clientele edgy, and the service pitiful. It was exactly what Eve was looking for. The music struck her in one clashing wave when she walked in. Mavis was managing to lift her appealing screech of a voice over the band, which consisted of one multi-tattooed kid on a melody master. Eve snarled off the offer from a guy in a hooded jacket to buy her a drink in one of the private smoking booths. She jockeyed her way to a table, pressed in an order for a screamer, and settled back to watch Mavis perform. She wasn't half bad, Eve decided. Not half good either, but the customers weren't choosy. Mavis was wearing paint tonight, her busty little body a canvas for splatters and streaks of orange and violet, with strategically brushed splotches of emerald. Bracelets and chains jangled as she jittered around the small, raised stage. One step below, a mass of humanity gyrated in sympathy. Eve watched a small, sealed package pass from hand to hand on the edge of the dance floor. Drugs, of course. They tried a war on them, legalizing them, ignoring them, and regulating them. Nothing seemed to work. She couldn't raise the interest to make a bust and lifted a hand in a wave to Mavis instead. The vocal part of the song and such as it was. Mavis leapt off stage, wiggled through the crowd, and plopped a painted hip on the edge of Eve's table. "Hey, stranger." "Looking good, Mavis." "Who's the artist?" "Oh, this guy I know." She shifted, tapped an inch-long fingernail on the left cheek of her butt. "Caruso." "See, he signed me." "Got the job free for passing his name around." Her eyes rounded when the waitress set the long, slim glass filled with frothy blue liquid in front of Eve. "A screamer? Wouldn't you rather I find a hammer and just knock you unconscious?" "It's been a shitty day," Eve muttered and took the first shocking sip. "Jesus, these never get any better." Worried, Mavis leaned closer. "I can cut out for a little while." "No, I'm okay." Eve risked her life with another sip. "I just wanted to check out your gig, let off some steam." "Mavis, you're not using, are you?" "Hey, come on." More concerned than insulted, Mavis shook Eve's shoulder. "I'm clean, You know that. Some shit gets passed around in here, but it's all minor league. Some happy pills, some comers, a few mood patches. She pokered up. If you're looking to make a bust, you could at least do it on my night off. Sorry. Annoyed with herself, Eve rubbed her hands over her face. I'm not fit for human consumption at the moment. Go back and sing. I like hearing you. Sure. But if you want company when you split, just give me a sign. I can fix it. Thanks. Eve sat back, closed her eyes. It was a surprise when the music slowed, even mellowed. If you didn't look around, it wasn't so bad. For 20 credits she could have hooked on mood enhancer goggles, treated herself to lights and shapes that fit the music. At the moment, she preferred the dark behind her eyes. This doesn't seem quite your den of iniquity, Lieutenant. Eve opened her eyes and stared up at Rourke. Every time I turn around. He sat across from her. The table was small enough that their knees bumped. His way of adjusting was to slide his thighs against hers. You called me, remember, and you left this address when you logged out. I wanted an appointment, not a drinking buddy. He glanced at the drink on the table, leaned over to take a sniff. You're not going to get one with that poison. This joint doesn't run to fine wine and aged scotch. He laid a hand over hers for the simple purpose of watching her scowl and jerk away. Why don't we go somewhere that does? I'm in a pisser of a mood. Rourke, give me an appointment, at your convenience, then take off. An appointment for what? The singer caught his attention. He cocked a brow, watching her roll her eyes and gesture. Unless she's having some sort of seizure, I believe the vocalist is signaling you. Resigned, Eve glanced over, shook her head. She's a friend of mine. She shook her head more emphatically when Mavis grinned and turned both thumbs up. She thinks I got lucky. You did. Rourke picked the drink up and set it on an adjoining table where greedy hands fought over it. I just saved your life. Goddamit, if you want to get drunk, Eve, at least do it with something that will leave you most of your stomach lining. He scanned the menu, winced, which means nothing that can be purchased here. He took her hand as he rose. Come on, I'm fine right here. All patience, he bent down until his face was close to hers. What you are is hoping to get drunk enough so that you can take a few punches at someone without worrying about the consequences. With me, you don't have to get drunk. You don't have to worry. You can take all the punches you want. Why? Because you have something sad in your eyes. And it gets to me. While she was dealing with the surprise of that statement, he hauled her to her feet and toward the door. I'm going home, she decided. No, you're not. Listen, pallid. That was as far as she got before her back was shoved against the wall and his mouth crushed hard on hers. She didn't fight. The wind had been knocked out of her by the suddenness, and the rage under it, and the shock of need that slammed into her like a fist. It was quick, seconds only, before her mouth was free. Stop it, she demanded, and hated that her voice was only a shaky whisper. Whatever you think, he began, struggling for his own composure. There are times when you need someone. Right now, it's me. Impatience shimmering around him, he pulled her outside. Where's your car? She gestured down the block and let him propel her down the sidewalk. I don't know what your problem is. It seems to be you. Do you know how you looked? He demanded as he yanked open the car door. Sitting in that place with your eyes closed, shadows under them? Picturing it again only fired his anger. He shoved her into the passenger seat and rounded the car to take the driver's position himself. What's your fucking code? Fascinated with the whiplash temper, she shifted to key it in herself. With the lock released, he pressed the starter and pulled away from the curb. I was trying to relax, Eve said carefully. You don't know how, he shot back. You've packed it in, but you haven't gotten rid of it. You're walking a real straight line, Eve, but it's a damn thin one. That's what I'm trained to do. You don't know what you're up against this time. Her fingers curled into a fist at her side. And you do. He was silent for a moment, banking his own emotions. We'll talk about it later. I like now better. I went to see Elizabeth Barrister yesterday. I know. Calmer. He adjusted to the jerky rhythm of her car. You're cold. Turn up the heater. It's busted. Why didn't you tell me that she'd asked you to meet Sharon, to talk to her? Because Beth asked me in confidence. What's your relationship with Elizabeth Barrister? We're friends. Rourke slanted her a look. I have a few. She and Richard are among them. And the senator? I hate his fucking, pompous, hypocritical guts, Rourke said calmly. If he gets his party's nomination for president, I'll put everything I've got into his opponent's campaign. If it's the devil himself. You should learn to speak your mind, Roark, she said with a ghost of a smile. Did you know that Sharon kept a diary? It's a natural assumption. She was a businesswoman. I'm not talking about a log, business records. A diary, a personal diary. Secrets, Roark. Blackmail. He said nothing as he turned the idea over. Well, you found your motive. That remains to be seen. You have a lot of secrets, Roark. He let out a half laugh as he stopped at the gates of his estate. Do you really think I'd be a victim of blackmail, Eve? That some lost, pitiful woman like Sharon can unearth information you can't and use it against me? Number. That was simple. She put a hand on his arm. I'm not going inside with you. That was not. If I were bringing you here for sex, we'd have sex. We both know it. You wanted to see me. You want to shoot the kind of weapon that was used to kill Sharon and the other, don't you? She let out a short breath. Yes. Now's your chance. The gates opened. He drove through,